We had installed this last week the PhantomFocus monitoring system. It's the invention of Carl Tatz. He and Adam Smith spent 3 days here. And with the package that we got, they placed the speakers. We already had the Focal Twin Bs, so they placed those on their stands. They installed their audio processor in our machine room. They installed both of their subs. They're actually PhantomFocus subs, and there's 2 of them, one on either side. We have 2 PhantomFocus chairs. They're made for engineers, and our posture of leaning over and working on patch bay or sitting back, they're designed to support our back no matter what position we're in. So Carl and I had a great conversation right before he left. I recorded it, and I want to share some of what we talked about.
There's nothing more important in a control room. The single most important thing, obviously. The whole thing is about the sweet spot. There's only one real sweet spot in any room. It doesn't matter, what the speakers are, what room it is. There can only be one God spot, and that's just based on physics. That's not PhantomFocus, it's just physics. So of course you can walk around the room, depending on the room, how it's treated. There's going to be bumps and there's going to be nulls, but generally it'll sound good. But as soon as you step inside the apex of that PhantomFocus triangle, you're in another room.
Right.
And that's the exciting part, where for the first time ever, you're hearing, oh my God, this is what I always wanted to hear.
Right.
There's like 4 items here I wanted to talk about that I thought would be of interest to anyone. So 3 of these 4 are completely free, and I wanted to mention them to you because I got this information from Carl Tatz's website. The first thing is about monitor placement. He calls it the NULL positioning ensemble, and basically it's setting your monitor speakers in an equilateral triangle to the listening position.
And it's on the Carl Tatz Design website in the library under Acoustic Tools. And it's a graph and it's self-explanatory. And if you do that, it makes a huge difference in your imaging. It's not going to do a whole lot frequency response-wise, but that's the model. That's the go-to source for all our PhantomFocus systems. Use it. In a near-field system, it's the 67.5 inches from tweeter to tweeter, which isn't magic. It just it's a good distance, and we're consistent with all the PhantomFocus systems across the country. So you can go from one to the other and have a very similar experience. So I highly recommend you do that. On the website, there's some photographs showing you how to do it.
He'll tell you he can bat 1,000, as long as you have a rectangular space, that the dimensions, the height, the width, and the depth. The first thing, this NULL positioning ensemble, positioning your speakers, putting the tweeters at the height of your ears. You don't have to have a PhantomFocus chair to do this. Any chair that you can adjust the height on so that you're in a comfortable sitting position, you can adjust the height and then measure the height of your ears, have somebody help you do that, and then that's the height that you put the tweeters. First reflections, you have basically 3 of those: off the ceiling, off the left wall, and off the right wall. So one trick, you can use a mirror on the side walls, and sitting in the listening position, you have somebody move a mirror, and any place you can see a speaker, that's a first reflection. That's where you put absorptive treatment, okay? So that goes on the left and the right walls. His suggestion is to completely deaden the ceiling.
Make the ceiling dead and the back wall dead is very important. Those are the 2. Then the sides can be absorptive and diffusive, but that's what the columns are about.
Right.
It just gives it an openness.
I've heard you use the term acoustic lens before.
That's what it's called, the acoustic lens, yeah.
Right.
Those columns put together. So what the idea is that the sound out of the speaker kind of grazes those columns. and catches it that way.
Right.
Rather than, if you put something like really dead right next to your ears, it doesn't feel quite as good.
Right.
It's better to have some openness there.
The third thing, and this is another thing that you can do on your own, it's called the AXIAL mode calculator spreadsheet, and it's on his website. So basically what you do is you enter the height of your space, the depth of your space, and the width of your space. Carl uses the AXIAL mode calculator to determine where the listening position is and where to actually set the console and the speakers.
There's an example there of positioning, and then there's the actual active one where you can put your dimensions in.
Right.
Now these are based on rectangular rooms. If it's
Right.
not rectangular, then it's not going to be as accurate.
And so the calculator is awesome. You can know the modes of your room in 10 minutes. After you download the spreadsheet and put it in, it's very graphic. It shows you exactly where the harmonics are. It shows you what's called the nulls, the frequencies that and where they're quiet, and the peaks, the frequencies and where they're the highest in your room. So it's super interesting. And that's sort of where the magic goes away, and the science and the math help us understand what our room is doing.
So the processor, it does several things. Obviously, the big thing, maybe the biggest thing, is the crossover. It's one of the big things. Figuring out the crossover between the subwoofer system and the speakers, and getting that phase accurate so that when you hear 20 hertz coming out of the speakers, it sounds like 20 hertz is coming out of these little near field speakers. It's not localized,
Right.
so it doesn't sound like, oh, I hear that, now I hear the subwoofer over there.
Right.
So that's the whole trick. That's the magic in getting using different slopes and crossover points. More often than not, we use a Butterworth crossover, which is the most severe,
Right.
but it has a nice knee to it. But sometimes that doesn't work. We'll go to a Lindquist Riley. It's usually one of the two. And typically we'll cross over to about 120 hertz because that's where the Ellison effect takes place. There is always a huge drop at about 120 hertz, and then it'll come back later,
Right.
depending on what the speaker does. We have a PhantomFocus template that we use, so it gets rid of the dips where we can. Sometimes you can't boost some dips. You can be very aggressive in the subwoofers, but once you get above that, you have to be careful. And we have a shape. A lot of people think flat is it, and it's not. As we discussed earlier, flat is bass shy because your ears need to hear more low end so it sounds as loud as the mid range. The whole idea is once you have that, there are no more peaks and dips anymore. So where in the past you may have turned it up and said, oh, that's too loud because you got a peak at 1K or 4K or 5K, whatever, and that's your volume. That's how you make your decisions on the volume. Once that's gone, you'll listen louder than you used to listen to.
Right.
Because everything's smooth.
Because you can trust it.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, there's no peaks. It's not, no particular frequency is hurting your ears. You're hearing, again, what you always wanted to hear for the first time. That's why it'll play unbelievably loud, much louder than we've listened to already. And then you can play it incredibly soft and you still hear the bass. Everything is still there because nothing is being masked anymore.
The details are there.
Yeah.
One of the things Carl has said to me many times is that when you get the positioning of your speakers right and you're sitting in the listening position, you stop hearing the speakers and you start hearing the content. You start hearing what was recorded. You start hearing the source. And it's very true. It's weird. It's like wearing headphones at a certain point when your head is right in the middle of the listening position. Now, that's not to say if you go other places in the room, it doesn't sound incredible because it sounds great everywhere. But having that one position where you mix and where you track and a place where you can set your client and say, okay, what do you think of this? They're hearing the correct frequencies, they're hearing the correct levels, and you can make decisions in your mixes based on what's really happening, not what you think is happening. So I'm just thrilled. I'm so thankful, and I certainly hope nobody will perceive this video as I'm speaking from a point of authority or anything like that. It's just a heart of thankfulness that I come to you with, because it's such a privilege to have amazing friends like Carl and amazing friends like the people that have helped me build this place, that have painstakingly watched out for details and gone the extra mile to make it happen.
Today it's completed, and I'm so appreciative, Carl. Thank you for coming to
I'm
Canton.
so appreciative, and I just really admire you taking, going the distance on this whole thing. Ron, what you've done is a DIY PhantomFocus MixRoom. More and more people are doing that. And if somebody purchases a PhantomFocus system like you did, then I will help them get where they need to get.
I think so. It sounded pretty good. Yeah.